the next speaker we have is Brother Hud Williams. Mr. Williams is the regional manager for Saturna and has worked in the financial industry for over 20 years. He also serves on the board of the Muslim Aid USA Relief Organization. Mr. Williams is an alum from Georgia Institute of Technology, where he earned his MBA. Mr. Williams is currently working on a certificate in Islamic finance at the International Center for Education in Islamic Finance, located in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Williams.
He said you have to turn on the mic, so that was my first key learning lesson today. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So my name is Hud Williams, and the title of our presentation is Investing in Zakat in the Black American Muslim Community. The original title for my talk was, Has Islamic Finance Left Behind the African American Muslim Community? So has Islamic finance left behind Black American Muslims? And so we're going to get into that. And so one of the things I wanted to start with, though, is that October 2024 is the inaugural Islamic Financial Literacy Month. How many people knew that October was Islamic Financial Literacy Month? Raise your hand. That's okay, because this is the first one. So it's an opportunity for us, for practitioners, academics, and other people who care about this industry to really reach out to our community as a time to talk about what it means for personal finance, what it means to be financial literate, and how does our religion, how does our faith impact what it means to be financial literate. So inshallah, after this year, we'll start seeing more and more about Islamic financial literacy. So as they say, my name is Hud Williams. I am from Dallas, Texas, so I live in Dallas. And I have been I've served in many different backgrounds. So to get a little bit about me, I used to be a youth director at the All Dulles Area Muslim Society, one of the largest masjids in the US, the largest masjid in Virginia. I also worked for Guidance Residential. I worked in Islamic home financing for about 2 or 3 years. I studied Islamic finance at NCF, where there was some other attendees who actually got their PhD and masters from NCF. And so for the last 3 years, I've been the regional manager for Amana Mutual Funds, and several presenters talked about Amana Mutual Funds and Saturna Capital. It's the oldest and largest Islamic investment company in the US. So we've been investing along with Islamic principles since 1986. We have over 7 billion assets under management. So alhamdulillah. But just 2 short stories about why this topic and the work that we do at Amana, the work we do at Guidance, is so important to me. So the first topic is, I think it was in 2001, I went to a presentation on Islamic finance at George Mason University. And I'm gonna give you a summary of that presentation. He said that Islamic financing was haram, Islamic insurance was haram, insurance was haram, financing was haram, banking was haram, investing was haram. And then this presenter, he got off stage, he went back to his hotel room, he got his stuff, and he flew back to the country that he came from. And it really bothered me. Like, this is my home. We have to make Islam work here, right? So everything can't be haram because I live here and probably I'm gonna die here. And so I'm gonna raise my children here. I got my son right here in the back, Zayn Muhammad Williams. And so how do I make Islam work for me in this country? That's the first story. The second story is I work in finance. I've been working in finance for 20 years, and people in the masjid know that. So an auntie of mine, she came up to me and she said, Brother Hood, can you help me look at my retirement? I said, no problem. We sat down. She showed me what she was getting in Social Security. She showed me, other things that she was getting. She paid off her house. And I said, and this woman took her Shahada in 1972. So 50 years, she's been Muslim in this country for over 5 decades. And when she became a Muslim, she decided to wear a hijab. And this is the African-American woman. So in the South, right? And so when you put on that hijab, your family is like, oh my God, she must have joined a cult. Right? So it caused some ostracization in her family, but she soldiered on. So now I'm sitting down with her in 2022, and I'm asking her about her retirement, and she has $863 from Social Security. That's what she's going in retirement for. And I said, well, where's your 401k? Where's your IRA? She said, I never invested in that because I thought it was haram. So here's this woman, Muslim woman, practicing woman, faithful woman, going into retirement in a very vulnerable state because no one informed her there was a way to save and invest for her future, but to do so in a way that's aligned with her faith. So this is why the work that we're doing is so important. And so we're going to talk about Islam in America, but first I want to talk about Islam in the African-American community. When we think about Islam in America, of course, we've seen it several times, a very diverse group, not just in ethnicity, but also in financial resources. So it's like a barbell distribution where 40% of people are below the poverty line and 25% of people make more than the average across all ethnic and diverse groups. And you'll find that this distribution will also is meaningful when you think about races and ethnicities. You'll find more African-American Muslims on this low end, and you'll see more Muslims from other places on this high end. And so, there we go. And so when we think about Islam and African-American community, we have 2 large sections. One is Muslims who came from the former Nation of Islam community, and one who came from traditional Orthodox Sunni or Shia communities. And both of these communities have their starts or their origins in the early 1930s. Elijah Muhammad established the Nation of Islam in 1933. If you look at the traditional Sunni, Imam Wali Akram started a masjid in Cleveland in 1937. And throughout 1960s and 70s, there was a lot of African-American Muslims converting to Islam. In 1975, Imam Wafdi Muhammad transitioned his community to Orthodox Islam. And when you think about this, this is probably the largest mass conversion in the history of Islam in America. And then also you have traditionally Sunni communities where my parents came from, the Dar al-Islam movement, the Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood, and my parents were in the Islamic Party of North America. If you look at what are some of those features of this African-American Muslim community, and these are important to talk about how we relate to finance. So first one is a general mistrust for the American government. And as an African-American, it makes sense. If you look at the history of the civil rights movement, it makes sense why African-American Muslims don't trust the American government. My father was 10 years old and Martin Luther King was assassinated. And he told me that that's when he gave up on America. Later on, my dad became a Black Panther. And later on, even because of that political protest, that's why he joined that's part of the reason why he became Muslim. Another feature is lower income. You also have varying degrees of engagement with the immigrant community overall. And then you have the ideas of Malcolm X, the Malcolm X effect. If you talk to many converts in America, Caucasian or African-American, they read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and this is one of the things that led them to their conversion. You have an African-American Salafi community, primarily in the Northeast, and you also had prison conversions that were happening in mass. But now when you look at those communities today, you have three kind of large segments and large communities. One is the Imam Wharf Imam community. These masjids are located in large urban communities or urban areas of, large and medium communities. And if you go to these communities, you'll see an aging structure. So they have prime real estate now, but you'll see an aging structure, and you'll also see a population that's aging as well. They have high educational attainment and often are ignored or selectively isolate themselves from the general Muslim community. Number two, you have Northeast Muslim communities. These communities are large and robust. If you think about New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, they are equal parts converts and second and third generation Muslims. And they're geographically divided, so they usually are in the inner city. And the third group is the unaffiliated, right? They're not in the Northeast. They're in places like Dallas, like Houston, like Atlanta. And these are recent converts. Many of those folks converted in college. And they develop links between African American and also African immigrant communities. You'll see a lot of links between those two. And they're largely integrated within the American Muslim community. And if you think about it, so people ask me, I live in Dallas. They were like, well, Dallas have like an African American masjid. And I would tell them we have a WhatsApp group, right? That's what they have, right? And so now we want to say, get to the part of American Muslim investment in zakat survey. So to understand how African American Muslims, I did a survey of American Muslims on zakat and investing. And so it was a practically small survey, probably around 200 to 300 responses. Of that, 100 were Black American, African American, or African immigrant. And then another part of it was South Asian or Arab. And then there was another third part that was unaffiliated, or they didn't declare their ethnicity. So this was focusing on the economics, demographics, and zakat. So when you look at demographics, a couple of things to point out. You can see that over here, that their employment, their age, and whether or not they're married was relatively equal. And then I also wanted to see what was their wealth. And so for a classification for their wealth, we said, how many people have qualified for having over the NACIF amount when you're thinking about zakat? So for African-American group, that amount was only 51%. And if you compare that to the South Asian Arab community, it was actually 80%. So that's almost like a significant difference. But then we said, what kind of economic place are you? What kind of assets do you have? And so when we look at the assets, do you invest in crypto, retirement, real estate, and do you invest in education for your children? Do you have an educational savings account of 529? So you'll see through all those different qualifications that the South Asian and Arab community actually was investing in those categories at a higher rate than the African American community. Then when we move on to zakat knowledge and practice, there was no significant difference between folks who were, so there was no significant difference in understanding the difference between zakat and sadaqah and what is nisab. There was less understanding between the difference between zakatul fitr and zakatul mal in the African American community. And this is something I've seen myself. Both groups are paying zakat at a similar rate, but the African American community is less likely to calculate their zakat. So when you think about African American Muslims, these zakat calculators that a lot of organizations are having, African American Muslims are just giving in charity. They're not taking the time to actually calculate it out. And so both groups are using the same kind of inputs, whether it's salary, whether it's real estate, into their zakat calculations when they are calculating. One of the biggest difference was, how do you spend your zakat? So South Asian Arabs, as you can imagine, because they might have more connections to communities overseas, we're sending zakat overseas at a rate of 71% to 50%. But however, one of the things that African Americans, if you go to an African American masjid, you'll see one donation box. Zakat, sadaqah, any kind of charity you're giving is going to be in one box. If you go to other masjids, you'll see a box for zakat, you'll see a box for sadaqah, you'll see a box for masjid operations. And oftentimes, if they're trying to combine it, you're not going to see enough room for enough money for zakat, sadaqah, and then masjid operations. So they're using their zakat to pay for masjid operations. So using, what are we talking about here? So we go into conclusions and recommendations. So why are we talking about this? That really, we talked about Islamic financing, but we also talked about inclusion. So how do we really make Islamic and finance inclusive of our whole community? When Islamic, and anecdotally, when you think about Islamic finance, when I work for Guidance Residential, that the minimum requirement to finance a home is 20%. And for a community that's been economically disadvantaged historically, it's hard to be able to put down a 20% down payment. So you talk about really is Islamic finance, do they have the opportunity to do it, right? Is the COBM too high? Who knows what COBM stands for? Cost of being Muslim. Is that cost of being Muslim too high, right? And then you also talk about access. So I work in Islamic investing. And then one of the things that we did at Amana Mutual Funds is that we reduced the amount to start an investment account across our whole portfolio to just $100, right? Because we wanted to make sure that everyone can have access to Islamic investing. Additionally, but it's also, does the knowledge reach? So when you think about Islamic investing seminars, are those happening across our organizations? Are they happening across our masjids? Are they happening in African American Black communities? Are those investment seminars happening equally? And part of that is, you can understand, for profit-making companies are going to go to the places where wealth is, right? If they're looking for investments, someone investing 200,000 is going to make more funds for them than someone investing 200, right? So you have to think about, maybe companies aren't the ones who are really going to bring this kind of inclusion, because they're always going to be looking for the kind of higher income individuals. But so when you think about, is Islamic financing leaving behind the Black American Muslim community, it's not really enough data right now. But if we widen this aperture to say, is Islam leaving behind? Is that Islam in America leaving behind African American Muslims? You start to look at this a little differently. And people often say, well, Hud, if you go to ISNA, if you go to ICNA, if you go to MAS, many of the leaders there are African Americans, right? Aisha Prime, Ubaydullah Evans, Dr. Sherman Jackson, Imam Siraj Wahaj, Imam Zaid Shakir. These are all of our leaders. But they have the saying in America where America likes Islam but doesn't like Muslims. So we have to ask ourselves, does American Islam like Black leaders but not the Black community? And so when you think about, why is this, if you think about this issue, why is this important? Because very framework, what gives youth belonging in the American Muslim community is that culture that was started in the African American Muslim community. Right? If you're Palestinian, right, and you see a player who's playing in the NBA championship wearing a kifaya in a press conference, he doesn't have to say a word above that. That symbolism itself. For that young boy who was named Muhammad, and he goes by Mo, and he goes into a classroom where the greatest is standing upside, where Muhammad Ali's picture is standing up there. This gives youth a sense of belonging. It makes their identity as a Muslim feel cool and accepted. And one of the things that Dr. Sherman Jackson talks about is that the Prophet ﷺ was comforted by his family, by his tribe. The Banu Hashim tribe gave the early Muslims cover to be protected in Mecca. And so the African-American Muslim community gave all Muslims a way to be protected in America. Because if you look at, we're in Houston. Can you think about Houstonians not like a Muslim when Hakeem delivered them 2 championships? Right? When it's just natural in us. And we see about a Barbie doll, Ibtihaj Muhammad, having a Barbie doll that you can give to your kids. So over and over and again, you see that African-American Muslims have given American Muslims a sense of belonging, but that's because of the investment that was made in the African-American Muslim community in the 1960s and 70s. So we have to ask ourselves, are we still cultivating that garden that we're benefiting today? So I tell youth that everything you're doing today or not doing today is going to affect you 15 years from now. So we as a Muslim community, what we're doing today, what we're cultivating today is going to affect us 15 to 20 years from now. So if we're not cultivating Islam in everywhere, I'm not just talking about in the urban cities, I'm talking about in the rural cities, that we have to make a decision as a community if Islam is for everyone in America, or is it for these suburban communities that can get 2-inch thick carpet so their knees can feel better during Tarawih prayer? We have to ask ourselves, do we want Islam to be for everyone in America? Because if not, 15 or 20 or 30 years from now, we're going to have to live with that decision that we're making today. And just one more slide. So when we think about recommendations, there's a couple. The first one, we have to acknowledge that we're not investing in communities equally across different socioeconomic classes, right? You can't help a problem if you don't acknowledge that it exists. Number 2, we have to invest in urban Islamic infrastructures, Islamic schools. We have to invest in masjids and Islamic centers. If you go to Dallas, there's like hardly any African-American-led masjids. There's one. Like people think of Dallas as like this new Medina, right? But there's one, right? There's one for African-American Muslim community. And we're going back to, we're saying that this is 25% of the American Muslims. And then there's small things. Like I was surprised to see at Islamic schools, there's no commemoration for Black History Month. And we have like phenomenal Black history, Black Muslim leaders like Malcolm X. Like they're not just American, that they're across the globe, like Muhammad Ali. But there was nothing, not a word, not a peep for Black History Month about Black Muslim history in the US. And then we also have to engage in talking about investing, because the more that we can think about investing and we can have our leaders talk about investing as something that's, that's required, not required like Fudger, right? There's no bid there. I mean, it's required like brushing your teeth. The Prophet ﷺ had good hygiene. He used the miswak. And so brushing your teeth is something required, but so also is saving for retirement. In these presentations, I say that investing and saving for retirement is like going to paradise. People are like, no, I'm retired. It's not paradise. I still got to work, right? But it's like paradise because you just can't show up for it. You just can't show up for retirement and say, I'm here. They're going to say, what have you prepared for it? And we can't show up for paradise and say, I'm here. They're going to ask you, what have you prepared for it? And I also tell people that, because people are like, why should I invest? Is it really that important? And I tell them that they talk about investing for retirement in the Quran. And we have scholars here, and people are like, where is this in the Quran? This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, right? When he was interpreting the Pharaoh's dream, the Pharaoh dreamed about 7 fat cows being devoured by 7 lean ones, and 7 green ears of corn and 7 other withered. And when Prophet Yusuf gave the narration of what that dream means, it said, you're going to have 7 years of great harvest where it's going to be plentiful. And they're going to be followed by 7 years of famine. And these years of famine are going to outstrip these years of harvest. And what I tell people is that Prophet Yusuf said, put me in charge of the storehouse. And so what I'm telling people is that you have to be in charge of your own storehouse. You have to be Prophet Yusuf because you have 40 years to work. And then if God wills, you're going to have another 20 years of living after those years. And so if you don't take from those years that you were working to provide for those years when you're in retirement, it's not going to be there. And I see the guy on here on time, so I'm going to wrap up. I think we have 2 minutes for questions. Sure. So thank you. Thank you to NACIF. Amana Mutual Funds was a sponsor this year and last year, and we always enjoy this, and we enjoy everyone mentioning us in their presentations as well. So.